I'm a short X shape with a very short waist. Petite rules often accentuate my bust or are somehow off balance. I retired recently and want a more creative style. So 2 things here. Firstly, short X shape. So X shape is body shape. Short is a body variation. Short waist is a body proportion. Petite rules are very, very general. And over accentuating your bust sounds like you may have a slightly larger bust proportionally, which is another body variation. So when we're looking at our bodies and looking at what works for us, we have to bring body shape, body variations, and body proportions all into one set of guidelines for ourselves. And so remembering that this is not about a strict set of rules, and each of the body shape kind of rules or guidelines is just a generalized guidelines. You need to adapt them for your unique body. And this includes things like size of bust and how long or short-waisted you are. So as a short-waisted X, so even though X shape is all about the fit and flare shape, that is the most important thing, just thinking about the silhouette. But then how you do that will change based on your body variations and your body proportions. So as someone who has a short waist, you may not want to belt things. So some of the recommendations of putting on a belt may be too extreme for you, or you may only want a fine belt. You don't want a thick belt because a fine belt's not going to take up as much space in that short waist. So, but you may just want to look for clothes that have this fit and flare shape, that they are constructed in that way. And it may be, if you do belt, then belting in the same color as whatever you're wearing rather than an alternate color, because then we're not adding an obvious horizontal line. So there's lots of things we can think about there. But also too is clothes can just be constructed. They can have darts, they can have shaping, and all those things that create that great shape for you without having to really add a lot of emphasis at your waist. Because if wherever we are short proportionally, we don't want to add a lot of detail. And this is because it clutters up that area. Where we're long proportionally is where we can add more detail. And so therefore you might go, if I have a short waist, don't add a whole lot of detail, don't further shorten it. And even though some of the rules may be, tuck in at the waist or end your tops at the waist and your jackets and maybe for you, because you're short-waisted, you want to go just slightly longer, like an inch longer, a couple of centimeters longer to actually feel more balance between the top half of you and the bottom half of you. So things like too is what's making my bust look large. Well, yes, because if you are bringing everything in very extreme at the waist, if you have a larger bust and you're short in that proportion, it's going to be a little bit less balanced. So it's finding ways of playing with those guidelines and experimenting. And I always say experimenting is the only way you'll really find out what works for you. Experiment and take photos, because you'll see it more easily in a photo, because you get a more objective opinion. When you're looking at that photo in a way. It's very hard for our brains to see ourselves in the mirror like other people are seeing us. But I would recommend looking at body proportions, body shapes, body variations, and not over extremely doing the body shape, guidelines. And petite rules can just be, they're petites just about being short. So the biggest rule I have for petites is don't swamp your body with too much fabric. That is one of the biggest things. Make sure things fit. Don't have too much fabric, because that's often what swamps you. But everything else about petite, guidelines, they're still variable, because even within all petite guidelines, there's different body proportions. There are long-legged petites and short-legged petites. And you might find that most of the petite guidelines are based on a short-legged petite, but maybe you're a long-legged petite, and that's why you find some of those rules aren't working for you. And this is why figuring out what works for you specifically is really important, rather than taking a generalized set of rules that weren't written with you necessarily in mind.